It's not your fault that your parents didn't like each other. It's not your fault that he lied and cheated and stole and manipulated, and that she got sad, and then she got angry, and then she got sad, and then she just had enough. They got divorced. It's not your fault that your brother was the way he was. He was like this before you were born. It's not your fault that there was so much chaos going on and nobody knew. Sure, the schools knew that your brother was violent and hateful and a bully. Yeah, they knew that. I mean, he went through, 5, 6 schools before he got to 6th grade. None of it was your fault. Not one iota of it. There's nothing you could have done to stop them from being who they were. It wasn't your fault. Not one bit of it. It wasn't your fault that after your dad moved out, he had a heart attack. And he died and he got brought back to life. And then in the same year, your mother had breast cancer and both of her breasts removed. None of it was your fault. It wasn't your fault that your brother got arrested. It wasn't your fault that your brother got charged with multiple counts of sexual assault. It wasn't your fault that when you brought girls into your home when you were in middle school and high school, that your father and your brother would hit on them and follow them to the bathroom and sometimes walk in on them. Not one bit of this was your fault. And you tried. You tried to be quiet when you thought that would work. You tried to be smart when you thought that would work. You tried to be the problem solver and the peacemaker and the perfect kid until you weren't. You tried to not be like your father, your brother, your uncles, and your grandfathers. You tried to be different. You tried to be kind and loving and thoughtful until you couldn't. And it just didn't work anymore. They taught you that being kind and loving and thoughtful and sensitive were really bad things for a boy. You tried, though. I can't imagine you could have tried harder. And you survived. I mean, come on now. Gosh, in your 20s, you got kicked out of several colleges after getting kicked out of several high schools in your teens. You survived. You survived your brother being on the front page of the Newark Star-Ledger, so everybody in New Jersey knew that he held up old ladies at gunpoint. You survived going to visit him in all the different jails and prisons and penitentiaries. You survived being traded parents. You survived all of the harm you did to yourself, the drugs, the alcohol, the crime, the fires, the blackjack games in the school bathrooms, all the drug dealing, stealing from drug dealers. You survived being a low-level mob guy and hurting everybody and everything. You survived being somebody that you weren't. And what it did to you was painful. You survived all of it. And then you got put in a locked mental hospital for wanting to kill your girlfriend and yourself. You survived the mental hospital, and when you came out, the only thing that you were clear about was you couldn't go back to drugs and alcohol. You couldn't do recovery as you were doing it, and you never again wanted somebody to tell you what you could and couldn't do. You didn't want to ever be in a jail again, and you didn't ever want to be in a mental hospital again, where people with keys to doors could decide when you could get fresh air, and when you could eat, and when you could sleep, and when you could talk. And then you started asking yourself, who am I? If I was this sweet kid who was kind and thoughtful and beautiful And then I was this teenager who was full of pain and sadness and hate and violence, and made friends and lost friends and made friends and lost friends, and had girlfriends and treated them all terribly. Were you the guy who sexually assaulted his best friend at college? Or were you the guy who stood up when girls' and women's lives were being threatened? Who was I? And then the question kept coming up. Who am I? And why am I here? Why did I come into this world? What was my effing purpose? And then you tried meditation when nobody was meditating. In 1990, nobody was meditating back then. So you had to travel all over New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania to find books on meditation. And you found 2 of them. And you did what they told you, not having a clue if what you were doing was anything of what they said you should be doing. And then you got a teacher. You found a teacher who saw who you were. She saw how violent and hateful and full of venom you were. And more importantly, she saw the light that was inside of you. She saw your gifts. She saw what you were capable of, and she taught you Reiki. And Reiki changed everything. And you saw your mission, and you became a social worker and a counselor, and worked in kids' and families' homes. You did family preservation. You stood up for the teenagers who the courts and child protective services wanted to throw away. You stood up for them because there was nobody that stood up for you. And this was the beginning of learning why I was here. And meditation brought you to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. You actually backpacked by yourself in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, where grass and trees and bushes couldn't survive. Nothing was alive there. There was that one hawk. And then there was the day with the snow leopards who were watching you. And there was the days in the middle of nowhere, just walking, one step after another. And it was so quiet. The sand, it wasn't a desert sand, it was a sand of crumbly rock, little pebbles and coarse little sand. And you could hear your footsteps, and there was sometimes they even echoed. That's how quiet it was. You survived the Gobi Desert. And then you came back to the States after your time in Korea as an English teacher and 8 other countries in Asia. You came back and you were different. And you experimented with conscious dance and movement and ecstatic dance. And you became a DJ again. But this time you were a different DJ. You weren't a DJ to be cool and to get laid and to be the center of attention. You were a DJ to create safe spaces and opportunities for people to be beautiful and move their bodies and connect themselves with their own bodies, their own spirits, with the earth and other bodies and other humans and other spirits. And you connected with your own body and your own spirit. And you connected with other bodies and other spirits, and it was beautiful and alive. You were living and loving, and you became part of and created community and supported community, became a member of community, and you found your tribe. How many people get to find their tribe? You found your tribe. And it's not perfect. And my gosh, Michael, you're not perfect, and you don't have to be. It is okay being this incredible, kind, loving, confused, messy, sometimes introverted and sometimes extroverted, and sometimes wanting to hide under the bed, and sometimes wanting to stand in the middle of the room and say, I am here. And you get to make mistakes today, and it's okay. And you get to be a decent man. You get to be a decent man. You get to be a decent man. You didn't have to be what they did to you. You didn't have to be what they taught you. You get to be you today. And somehow, while lying down during a meditation in 2022 in Costa Rica, you had a vision of writing a book about what it was like to be raised, to hate girls and women, and to take from them and harm them, and what that was like for you as a teenager, and that was like for you as a young man. And it wasn't until you started writing this book about you and about what it was like to be trained explicitly to hurt girls and women and take what you want from the world, that it occurred to you, you had to write the story of who you became. It doesn't mean anything if they don't see that people can change, men can change, the spirit can change, that change is real and possible and beautiful and hard and messy and imperfect. And then finally, this past October of 2024, you self-published and launched your memoir. You had the courage and the strength to share this beautiful, brutal, painful, glorious story of hope and survival and the human spirit and what it's like to be alive and well in the world. You shared your story, and you're going to keep sharing it because that's who you are.